Hello, welcome everyone. I'm AI Joe on the twits. If you follow me, you'll get an advanced heads up when there's another event coming, so that you'll get a first opportunity to RSVP. Now I just want to thank IBM for the pizza and the awesome venue. Let's give them a round of applause. This will all be way, way harder without them and all their awesome volunteer staff, so it's terrific. Just one health and safety thing. In the event of an emergency, please just follow me out calmly out of the building. We'll go down the stairwell and so on. I may not look like a professional health and safety guy, but that's okay because I'm just going to be following one of the IBM guys out in reality. Just to give you guys an overview of the evening, we're going to have our industry highlight, and then we'll have Anne Wendt up for our keynote, and we'll have a bit of a Q&A session after each of those. Forgot to show you the big IBM logo. IBM, did I mention they're our key sponsor? So, yeah. Okay, so without any further ado, please welcome up Ben Reed, the Executive Director of the AI Forum.
Thank you, Joe. Microphone works? Yes. Excellent. My standard joke is that we're really good at AI, but not so good at AV, but it works.
So true.
Now, we have to just, having said that, we now need to do some reconnection down here. So just bear with us.
And if you'd like to avoid stooping to that podium, do feel free
Right.
to grab the seat.
Okay. These to be connected to. Great. And then go there. Brilliant. Okay, so look, thanks very much for inviting me along tonight, and just recognise the work that Joe and Lars have been doing, and the team just to organise these meetups. I think this is certainly the largest AI meetup in the country, technical meetup, and I think it's core for everybody to be able to sort of network and just examples of what's happening, and what sort of technologies are in place. So, as Joe said, I head up the AI Forum. How many folks have heard of the AI Forum? A few? Great. I'll just do a little bit to start with, just to position the forum, and how, what our place in the ecosystem is relative to, technical meetup groups like this. And then I'm going to talk about a bit of our program of work. Really would like to just keep it pretty interactive, so do feel free to just interject with a question as we go. And I'll talk about our recent research report, but these photos that you'll see here from the cover of the research report, if I go back about almost 2 years now to when we were starting to form the AI Forum in New Zealand, and we were, a number of us in the tech ecosystem, wondering, where are all the AI startups, right? Where are all the AI skills, machine learning skills? NLP, conversational AI skills that we're seeing in markets being invested in, usually overseas. Where are they in New Zealand? So, out of those conversations, broadly across universities, across industry, it's sort of the largest global tech giants right down to the smallest startups, and in government as well. We sort of set about to really to understand New Zealand's AI ecosystem and to set about connecting it and growing it. And as part of that, when we kicked it off, the conversation around artificial intelligence, which is just this very nebulous term. I'm sure that most people are coming to it enlightened by science fiction movies, and then folks like Elon Musk talking very much about sort of super intelligence and post-human intelligence take over the world and killer robots and so on. So those conversations were happening, and yes, they're a part of the conversation around AI, but the sort of more tangible piece that everyone in the room is working on wasn't really having its voice heard in amongst those more sensationalist media headlines. And so one of the exercises we did as part of our research was how do we make this stuff real? And so we basically brought, here are 6 examples of AI being used in New Zealand today. So for conservation, so you may have come across a cacophony project who are basically using AI to analyse bird song audio, so to count birds using audio, and you may have seen Grant talk at our AI Day conference earlier this year, looking for ways to bring forward pest-free New Zealand by analysing heat infrared video of invasive pests. Omeo have got the self-driving buses there, autonomous buses. MoleMap is an amazing company. If I shout out your company, by the way, feel free to do a woo. But MoleMap's doing amazing stuff, helping cancer specialists to detect skin cancer more accurately and quicker, and to increase their workload. Orbica have done the picture of the river there. That's an amazing story of Christchurch-based geo-AI company, applying machine learning techniques across low Earth orbit satellite and drone imagery of land. And so in this case, they're basically picking out natural features from aerial photography. In this case, all the water bodies in Canterbury. And this takes, they now got this algorithm working to where they can just take the whole of Canterbury and do it about, as I heard, about 40 seconds. Versus probably about 4 weeks for an analyst. And so every time that satellite goes around the world, you get an updated picture of natural features, not just rivers, they're doing buildings, working with airports, they're doing a project in the Saudi desert, some very huge cement factories, billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, and they're tracking the construction project progress from aerial photography to track project milestones. Down bottom left, solar machines. So we've got some fantastic conversational AI companies here in New Zealand. Solar machines actually I think I just had a strategic investment from Mercedes-Benz a week ago. I saw that announcement come through. And then top left is another company, a logistics shipping company, that's basically just using machine learning to predict, optimize the allocation of shipping containers to ships as they come into port. So that's a process that they need to do every month as the ships come in, and basically optimizing the number of containers per ship around the world. So just 6 examples. There's plenty more examples in that report. But a lot of our role is to surface stories. So all the projects that you're working on, all the real-world applications of these technologies, exciting technologies. I think we're really keen to hear them, and so part of what I'd like to do today is just to listen a little bit of what you might want from the AI Forum and how we can help you to achieve what you're working on. So look, in terms of the forum itself, so we started just over a year ago, and we were launched by then Minister Goldsmith in June 2017, and at the time I think we were sort of a core group of about 10 organisations. We're now approaching about 100 companies as members, and this slide's actually a bit out of date now. And as I say, this is ranging from IBM, which is great to have IBM's continual support of the AI ecosystem in New Zealand through meetups like this. We have Google and Microsoft on board, AWS on their way, working on some of the Chinese giants. And so if anyone's got any contacts at Baidu, Alibaba, those guys, I'd be really keen to chat. And then, right up, so big banks like ANZ, insurance companies, IAG, and then big, software companies like Jade and Xero, obviously. And then universities, so the major universities that are working in AI are on board. and then a whole raft of other organisations working in agriculture, working in conversational technologies, and then what's probably the most exciting is the number of startups that are coming through now. So at the real genesis of the AI Forum, we struggled to name more than 2 or 3 AI startups in New Zealand, and now we're just starting to see businesses starting to come through every week. So I've got a better map than that. Just a little bit about our organisation. So we're governed by an executive council, and so any organisation that's a member can nominate someone forward for the executive council. We've got some elections coming up this year for some of the vacant posts. I headed up day-to-day, Stu Christen's chair, and then Chantal, Andrea, and Georgia for our ops team. So we are part of. So one of the reasons that we are so effective. So we run pretty lean, and we are part of the New Zealand Tech Alliance. So the Tech Alliance is a community of technology associations. So if you're interested in biotech, if you're interested in financial tech, educational technology, blockchain association, tech marketers, IoT Alliance as well, and then recently GovTech World's launched as well. So and this is the group that also organises Tech Week, which is a big sort of festival of tech, New Zealand's technology sector, and a whole week of events around the country in May next year. So it's May every year, running up to the High Tech Awards. And so, we share communications channels and reach, and some shared services as well among these other communities, which really gives us disproportional reach and impact to if we're just doing this on our own. So, worth just understanding the tech lines. And if your organisation's working in AI and Internet of Things or fintech and AI, then there's obviously synergies to joining multiple associations there. And look, each of these associations is designed to bring together the community of people working in that technology space down the country. And we do provide a united voice for tech in New Zealand. Oh, sorry, I also didn't say on the previous slide, back here, not slick, is we're, sorry, not just universities, but also we have government departments as well. So increasingly, we're seeing AI influencing, being used to work on the data that's influencing policy, and certainly there's a lot of work being done now to start using machine learning to improve service delivery in government. So quite exciting work that's being done in the Ministry of Social Development, doing some very interesting stuff in what could be a sort of third rail space. You're playing with some very sensitive data, working in very sensitive political and social environment. So you have to be very, very clear and transparent about all of the organisations, all the ways that you're using people's data. So Nick Blakely is Deputy Chief Exec at MSD, was on the radio. If you go on our website, look at the newsletter 2 weeks back, there's a link to it, and he was explaining about how they're working through some of those challenges around joining together data sets and using personalised private data for their clients in order to deliver better outcomes, but making sure it's done in a transparent and fair way. It's a difficult space to work in. And fundamentally, we are a voice to ensure that New Zealand harnesses and seizes the benefits of this technology for our economy, and it's critical to our productivity and our international competitiveness, this technology, and so we cannot be a country that just exports raw protein to the rest of the world forever. We actually have to do things smarter, and we have to keep up with the change that's happening around the world. So just a little recap, I've sort of overspent my time already, I think, but just a very quick recap on what we've done. So just around the time that we were launching there, there's been, as I said, lots of media coverage about Elon Musk and the robots coming, and we've contributed to changing that conversation to make it more about what's real in our lives. How do we become more competitive? How do we increase the number of people coming through with the right skills? And then also the big conversation is certainly how do we ensure that the ethical concerns and the sort of social impacts of using these deep learning, big data technologies, and how do we ensure that they're properly governed, potentially regulated, and that they are safe and fair throughout. So I said I've got a better diagram for you. So we have been curating this ecosystem map. Hopefully you've seen this out of the way. Just literally about 2 hours ago, our team put this latest cut up. As I understand it, over 160 logos on there of all the organisations across the ecosystem that are working with AI. Now I'm sure that there are people in the room whose organisation is not on there. So there's a link at the bottom there. Send us an email, we'll get you on the map. What we've found is this is a really good piece for a number of reasons. This, first of all, connects the ecosystem so people are able to see who's doing what. So if you're looking for a services provider, there's a whole bunch of professional services providers there. If you're interested in who's using AI in your industry sector, so insurance or banking or energy, then go and look at those. Each of these is backed up by a lightweight case study, if you like, of work that they're doing. Ecosystem enablers, the universities doing their research, and then underneath, sort of the platform enablers like IBM, who are working hard, and so who enable this technology to be deployed at scale. So download that and do let us know if you're not on there. The other thing that's been really good, by the way, is this has been retweeted all the way around the world. So there is an awareness now, and we're starting to see now that New Zealand is gaining a little bit of a profile. Certainly not up there with Canada, not up there with the US, not up there with China or the UK, but relative to some of the other economies, where we place in the OECD, we're actually doing fairly well. Okay, so look, hopefully you may have seen the research report I was talking about earlier. We managed a number of parallel research streams, released this report just at the beginning of May. And it's really a sort of a line in the sand, state of the nation, where is AI in New Zealand now, and what do we need to do about it to move it forward? And so, there were a number of key stats there. One of the big concerns that continues to percolate in the media and polarises debate is what's going to happen to my job? If the robots take my job, am I going to be automated out of a job? We did a reasonably deep economic analysis. Our team of analysts, worked on that. And if you look at the past as a guide to the future, which is one of the assumptions that you've got to challenge a little bit, but if you look at previous technological revolutions, whether it's the car replacing the horse, whether it's the internet replacing classified advertising, what you've actually seen is the net number of jobs continues to increase, right? So there were 27,000 typists and stenographers in New Zealand back in the 1960s. We probably count a few hundred of them now, but that doesn't mean there's 27,000 people out of a job. People have managed to pick up these skills, retrain, and then recycle themselves into new roles. So I think the message that we took out of that is that the individual tasks within roles, will become automated, but that is an enabler for people to do higher order, more complex tasks as part of their roles. So I think there's still a long way to go in that debate internationally. One of our roles, by the way, is to bring the best practice internationally into New Zealand. So we're part of the Global Partnership on AI, which is a coalition of, I think, coming up from 100 organisations worldwide now. It's founded by 6 US tech giants, including IBM. And just literally last week, we finally got the first Chinese tech giant on board, so Baidu joined up, and I think that's a really important part of the international conversation because I'll talk about it in a moment, but the AI global strategy, if you like, is often portrayed as a sort of strategic war between China and the US as to who can get ahead of this technology fast enough, which is very binary. And I think that there are definitely, no one would be naive enough to think that there aren't differences in approaches between those two countries to the technology, but long term we do all have some common goals about ensuring this technology is deployed safely and does for the benefit of humanity, and investigating that very cross-cultural definition of benefit of humanity. From an economic perspective, huge GDP upside, productivity upside for the country if we take advantage of these automation applications. Some amazing case studies now coming out of, in agriculture, for example. Who's seen the kiwi fruit picking robots? Yeah, so that's doing, I've seen it. So that's based on some research that's done at Auckland University, using machine vision to basically identify the kiwi fruit. A year ago they were picking one every 5 seconds. So it just guides. The little robot just goes through the orchards, and the orchards have got massive problems finding workforce. It's unsafe work often. It's cold conditions, wet conditions, out there all day, and so this is solving a labour force problem that it's just impossible to find workers that want to work in those conditions now. And so this is solving that problem and making that production of kiwi fruit more efficient and also safer. But yeah, it's really so one every 5 seconds, and then it comes down to one every 2 seconds within a year. We're just training the model better and better, and then which gives you an idea that humans are sort of one every 1 second with 2 hands. And so pretty soon you'll be able to just go to an automated orchard, and that goes across forestry, that goes across agriculture. Imagine how many deaths we still have in our forests. Yeah, so big opportunities for the technology that you're working on to make primary industry safer. However, and then probably pertinent to today's talk is just there's a huge worldwide shortage of you guys, machine learning experts, and huge competition for your skills. And so, how do we ensure that New Zealand is able to keep you guys here and bring more people through schools and universities, and then also attract the right people in as well to work. So, big questions. That's what we're here for. So we're a sort of aggregated voice to help those policy discussions, to raise them up the agenda, and to give technology as much of a voice as dairy farming or tourism has. Okay, so out of the report, we identified sort of 6 themes that New Zealand really needs to work on. So I won't read them all out, but we've now spun up 6 working groups who are on. So Lars is a member of working group 3, assisting AI adoption, and growing the talent pool is a big piece there. Teaching AI in schools is one of our recommendations. I was talking to a teachers conference 2 weeks ago, and just saying that China now, machine learning principles, data science principles are being taught in primary schools, and you can see that the difference between that approach and the skills that are being taught in our schools as well. So how do we start testing that, prototyping it, and then enabling that to scale and roll out? Theme 6 there as well, adapting to AI effects on law, ethics, and society. I was talking about the retraining and the impact of automation. And so there's a real necessity that has been identified by our research and international research that the constant change and there is a speeding up in the rate of automation of tasks within our jobs. And as a result, we need to be learning from ongoing all the time. Yep.
Just like the kiwi fruit pickers.
So if I may, I'll just give you the microphone for
Right.
those of us who will be watching via video.
So just like the kiwi green one.
Third time lucky.
So just like the kiwi fruit people, for example, they have an eye, they have the experience, they may have been in a job 3, 4, 10 years.
10 years, 20 years.
They're
Truck
the
drivers.
perfect people to obviously get hold of the project managers and go, okay, look, we've got this problem, we keep on getting this, can you help? You know, or obviously be part of the team. I mean,
Be part of the team, yeah. And I think there's this model that people carry around, the sort of zero sum. You know, my role's going to be automated, therefore I'm going to be out of a job.
just the opposite.
And it is actually the opposite. It's like
They're
this.
going to get paid more.
Well, the automation frees you up to do the stuff that you never got time to do, right? And so you're seeing that in manufacturing now. You're seeing people with cobot operators where, you know, instead of actually running, you know, doing the manufacturing on a manufacturing line, they're managing a team of robots on the manufacturing line, yeah, and augmenting
Just like
themselves.
Having, you know, Z in New Zealand announce that they're trying to beat Uber at their own game and have planes flying around. We all think, oh, the Jetsons, you know, but to reality, it's not that far away.
Yep. So
And I think
big
that's
opportunities. Yeah.
awesome.
So autonomous vehicles are going to creep up on us a little bit quicker. Actually, just saw the Lime scooters. They just arrived. This
Yeah,
weekend. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Which is not AI, but you can imagine how you could apply it. I'll tell you what is AI, probably in their applications, the pickup application, you know, where you've got to pick them up and charge them overnight and so on. Yeah, so Waymo, which is Alphabet, so Google's parents, self-driving, you know, autonomous vehicle startup, they have driven 10 million miles, sorry, you know, real miles. Recently, that was their announcement, and you know, all of their cars have accumulated that experience, and then they're running, you know, they've run like millions and millions more miles in simulation based upon the real world data that they've gathered, the models they've created.
I was at a SQL Saturday just recently, and the keynote speaker said, well, what if you took those 30,000 yellow taxi drivers and took them out of it, because we now have autonomous, they're all worried about the job, but they still need to be maintained, they still need to have the charging stations, everything about that intelligence and how they drive, which way they go, that is key, and effectively their job will change, but the fact that if you make the taxis more efficient,
It enables a whole new set of capabilities that we possibly can't imagine right now. But if you've basically got, you know, next to zero cost autonomous transport on demand, then that has big applications of public transport. And you know, what can you do if you can visit 100 places? Like normally, right now, you can only visit 10 a day. Yes, one more question. Do you want a microphone?
Yes, sorry. I'll get to you.
I'm overrunning, so I'll
Oh, you're
I'll
fine.
finish.
No, we're actually very flexible. It's just up to you how much time you've got.
That's
Really.
good. I've got to get out to the airport a little bit in about
Yeah.
20 minutes.
sorry.
I was just going to comment on the fact though that I don't think we can underestimate fear as a motivating force in society. And so for those of us who are familiar with AI and the opportunities it presents,
Yeah.
to keep saying, but there'll be other opportunities without starting to really put some, you know, meat
Meat on the bones.
behind to say, how do you retrain, how do you take advantage of those opportunities? Because mostly the people that will be afraid of the new technology are those with a lower degree of education and a lower degree of financial wherewithal to withstand the change.
And I think that's also one of the focuses of that working group, is how do we support people who perhaps haven't grown up in a culture of lifelong learning, who perhaps, you know, dropped out of school or stopped going to school when they were 16 and have been working in a relatively manual trade for a number of years. How do we support those folks if their roles do get automated? So, yeah, I think these are really big questions, and questions that government needs to have their eyes wide open as to the future retraining paths and what the impact. You know, people talk about universal basic income as one potentials solve for that. Yeah, so anyway, we're deeply in that debate, and please do, if it's, and look, if your organisation joins the forum, then anybody can get hooked up with these working groups and get involved. Just a little strategy slide there, talking about working groups. Did just want to, so you're actually a little bit ahead of me. So this is our next research project that we've got spinning up right now, so it's probably due for launch about May next year. And this is going to look at, deeply now at the real-world impacts of AI on New Zealand in the near term, medium term future, and reasonably far future. Right across various verticals. So whether it's in agriculture, whether it's in tourism, transport, customer service, and really look at tangible examples of what's being developed in New Zealand now. So I'll put 6 case studies up there. We cover a lot of other case studies that are happening. Health as well is a huge impact. I mean, you see what the Apple Watch now is coming along with a whole bunch of sensors FDA approved for some of them, and so that's going to transform the delivery of some of the high-end health services. So this is so we're going to go deeply into future sectors and the impact of AI on our everyday lives, and use this hopefully to inform and talk about the jobs conversation as well, and use that to hopefully inform people about the opportunity, right? So the media really do like to spin the risks, and we live in that environment, and that's fine. But we like to sort of just counterbalance that with, here's actually what it is, right? So how long does it take you to train a model, right? And the robot's going to take over anytime soon. I've talked about Law Ethics Society. One thing I did want to just jump into is lethal autonomous weapons. So this is a real risk right now, right? So these are, by some accounts, already deployed in the field, where a machine is given the license to kill. And so there is a movement for a moratorium on these weapons, in the same way that we have one on chemical weapons internationally, of which the AI Forum has basically put its voice into support. It's actually a Kiwi, works for Human Rights Watch in New York, in Washington, sorry. She heads up that Human Rights Watch's push for this moratorium on LAWs. So, I think it's an important part of our conversation that as we're developing this technology, we are thinking about dual uses, right? So, yes, a machine vision algorithm can make keyword group picking far more efficient, but it could also be used for nefarious other purposes as well. And so I think there's certainly conversations this happening in partnership on AI as well, is that when you're developing technology is to understand how it could be used maliciously as well as in the way that you intended. If you go and look at Malicious AI Report, which came out last year, earlier this year, sorry, that's a fantastic deep report on the potential uses of AI for in cyber warfare and in conventional warfare, and talks very much around this sort of Darwinian, because like for every AI that's deployed in cyber warfare, then then there is a whole bunch of cyber defense AI that's required. So this is sort of Darwinian evolution, and will there ever be a massive unequilibrium between that? So there's a big question. Okay, so the context that we're all working in, and I was talking to Baron earlier about this, is just that the explosion of data that's happening around us right now, and most of that is unstructured. And so, in order for us to actually make any sense of this, we need the technologies that everyone's working with today. And so I think this is really, when you talk to most folks around around the world, they have a view that this graph's quite linear, it's quite flat, and we are in an explosion of data right now. I mean, right? And so we just need to keep developing technologies just to keep up, let alone to get ahead. One of the things I went to a great workshop a few months ago in Wellington by a guy called Gavin Starks, who founded the Open Data Institute, and he's been leading this concept of open data as being the infrastructure of our knowledge economy. So one of the means that we're working with is that in the same way as as we would spend billions of dollars on a new motorway, or we're going to go and build thousands of houses, that infrastructure investment, we need to think of investments in these technologies in a similar way to enable our future knowledge economy. Right? We're not going to be making money out of shipping raw protein from one end of the country to the other. In a few years' time, that stuff's going to get commoditized. Where's the higher value work, the higher value business that's going to generate future wealth?
Was that New Zealand or?
He's from the UK originally, but that's not New Zealand. That looks like somewhere warmer than New Zealand.
Like the I-5 or something?
Arizona.
Going up west coast of the US.
Oh yeah. I did talk about the international strategic situation. So part of our call is for a more coordinated approach to AI investment in New Zealand. China especially, so China's aiming to have a $30 billion AI industry and to be the world leader by 2030, and they're well on the way to get there. And we're not going to compete with that. Silicon Valley obviously is reaping the rewards of their AI and machine learning investment they've been doing for the last 10 years, 15 years. But places like Canada, South Korea, UK, EU, Singapore have all been investing hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars into AI research, AI commercialization, and right now New Zealand hasn't had a coordinated approach to that. So we're using some of our influence in government to help move investment towards those sorts of policies. And I talked about it being important for productivity. There's a fantastic paper here, Can the Kiwi Fly by the Productivity Commission, which really does identify New Zealand's slowness in adopting new technologies as being one of our core causes of our slowing competitiveness. So we're slipping down the international productivity competitiveness rankings, and then what can be done about it. So AI, machine learning, big data science is very much part of that conversation. I think I'll leave it there because I said I was going to keep it interactive and I'll just talk for half an hour. So thanks very much for having me. I would really, if your organisation is working with AI and not on the ecosystem, then please let us know. If you'd like to join as an AI Forum member and connect with people right across the ecosystem, from government, from universities, from startups, from big tech giants, please do. And really keen to hear from you about what we can do to help you with your day-to-day jobs.
And how are you for Q&A? That we're going to leave that off as well for now?
No, Q&A is good.
Q&A good?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. At least one question down here.
Just working in the healthcare industry, one of the biggest problems is access to the data. I mean, obviously it's very unstructured. But
Sorry, the mic's a bit directional. You sort of just point that in. Yeah.
Sure. So I just wanted to know, broadly speaking, what kind of inroads have you managed to make, and what are the key connections?
Health data's probably the hardest area to play in. And so, fundamentally, the whole area, the whole science of data ownership and data stewardship, those principles are starting to come through. Obviously, with Cambridge Analytica, it's become more of a mainstream issue than it used to be. They've still got to get worked through. So, and as a patient, there's a strong sense of personal ownership of your data, and yet if you go, until very, very recently, not in most GPs, you actually can't get your data out of the health board's system, right? and in the health board system, it's spread across multiple silos, and they all claim sovereignty over it. So, in terms of your personal data sovereignty, I think that industry's got a long way to go. So the people in New Zealand, the Precision Driven Health Initiative, are you part of that? Yeah, you see you working with Kevin, and yeah, great. So I think you're probably as far ahead as most. I think our role there, so we're having a number of conversations around sort of data sovereignty, personal data sovereignty, and those sorts of rules. And our role really is to, contribute towards that conversation about how do we enable, fighting death with data, really, to, how do we ensure this is done in a safe way where people are able to reap the benefits, because we know that there's, huge benefits from mining that data for, to be able to make better predictions. Tell me, what's the work you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're just looking at, the area that my friend and I were primarily working in was image analysis.
Right.
Was as radiologists.
Yeah.
So, but just trying to access, things such as linking semantics of clinic letters with scan findings, for example. It's a nightmare,
Good luck with that.
Yeah.
And then reading doctors' handwriting.
Yeah, well, that's another level,
Yeah.
So the electronic health record is way. But just wanted to know what kind of impetus and what kind of backing is coming from the government in terms of, because I don't see any really coordinated.
We're trying to raise these sorts of questions up the agenda, and we're having some success. I was at a minutes meeting with the Minister of Statistics a few weeks ago, and obviously statistics now is sort of a subset of data, and so one of the challenges is just from a legislation point of view, data sharing across government departments is actually not allowed, and everything, and government's very risk averse, health probably even more so. The guys at MSD have developed some really promising principles about how to use personal private data with the permission of the data owner. I think stats are probably driving some of that conversation in terms of general data sovereignty. I think we haven't had a huge amount of engagement with the Ministry of Health, but they need to just get integrated in that conversation. So we can contribute to that conversation. I've chatted to Kevin about it.
It's going to take an outside-in approach, I think.
Yeah, and I look, so for all of the stuff that we're doing, I think government in some ways find it quite refreshing that there is an independent voice that's actually helping, providing that point of view that's probably outside the normal sphere of the conversation. But we can set the private sector opportunities.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Probably worth just plugging our X-Triage project. We've got as an AI meetup, we've got this collaborative project which you can find linked on meetup.com, where we've found some pretty good data sets for radiology, and we've got some quite interesting results from them. And at the moment we're a medical doctor who's working on getting some interns together to see if we can do some comparative studies with him competing with our AI. So it's interesting to have a look at. We have another question down the back.
So maybe a bit trivial question, but about the employee pool in terms of AI.
The talent pool, employee pool?
Yes,
Yeah.
It's understandable with fresh out of university students, they usually get the AI-related projects. What about the existing software developers? Do they need to have like PhD in mathematics, or do they just have to educate themselves?
So I think there's a number of opinions. So what we're noticing, I think, is that probably even 3 to 5 years ago, you did need a PhD to actually get them to be able to train a model, because there wasn't really as much open source tool support as there is now. But there's a huge number of open source libraries out there now that give you that step up. And so the skills that you need, while you still need to understand the deeper principles, I don't think you actually need to be able to go right down into the nuts and bolts of it as much as you did before. I think there's still a way to go. We'll hear from Anne where the where the current state of the art is. And so, yeah, increasingly, the machine learning job description is deploying existing open source libraries rather than writing original software. It would be, and so as a result, and then the great thing about the open source libraries, you get this critical mass of training materials and community support around them as well.
So it's training on place, right? You get hired and then.
Yeah, you can. So there's obviously on the job training, but there are a whole bunch of micro credential courses now. Udacity, Coursera, really, largely freely available.
But it's all theory, no real project practice though. Is it a
Yeah, it's theory without project practice. So I just literally before now came from a conversation with Jan Behrens, who's the CTO of Gentrack. They've been building their intern program, and so I think they've got 11 interns this year. They've been bringing guys in from AUT to work on machine learning there. And so I think getting on last you were saying you're on Xero's intern program. So businesses, some of the larger technology businesses have got intern programs. I know that definitely the Air New Zealand, IAG, ANZ, all these Westpac, all of the big corporations are definitely hiring data science people. So does that answer your question a little bit?
Kinda. Thank you.
Okay.
So my question is more kind of an economic strategy one. So we're coming towards like a late cycle economy. Employment's pretty low, and there's a lot of talk about raising productivity, right?
Employment. What do you mean employment's low?
Unemployment.
Unemployment.
So we're running out of spare bodies and
Minds. Running out of spare minds.
Yeah, but so we're obviously in New Zealand we want to foster an economy based on high tech and build our own domestic technology solutions. But at the same time, there's a lot of businesses in New Zealand doing, they've got cows, they've got sheep, they've got stuff they want, they're producing goods. And the goal of AI is to increase productivity, right? So does does the organisation do anything to bring in foreign technology and help grow that, or do you believe that New Zealand we should keep those opportunities out as much as possible to foster internal kind of competition and heritage?
No, definitely don't keep foreign technology out. I think we want to participate in the competitive international market, right? So we want to create products that we can export all over the world, and then we want to import products that help us to be more productive. Also, technologies.
So my question was really, the point is, are you doing anything to bring them in? Because New Zealand's often left behind, or we're a couple of years behind on Netflix and all these services. Is there any effort from any level to have, the big great technology companies, the big fruit production?
So it's a good question. So as part of the Tech Alliance, so in the agri space,
just generally, agriculture.
In the agriculture space, so AgriTech New Zealand is one of the members of the Tech Alliance, and that's an association that's really focused on enabling New Zealand's agriculture industry with better technology, whether it's domestic technology, whether it's or whether it's imported technology. So they've taken folks over to Silicon Valley. They've been, and in California, they've been going out to sort of like orchards where you can't see the finish on the horizon. I think we've got the tech giants IBM, Google, Microsoft, and AWS within the forum, and so New Zealand is not going to create a competitor to one of those guys. We don't have that international scale, Xero accepted. But I think so as with generally in our tech sector, it's driven by historically it's been driven by passionate entrepreneurs that find their niche globally and they're able to scale to that niche. And but we've tended not to hold on to our businesses once they get past 100 million or something, and they tend to then exit to bigger pools of capital around the world to be taken forward. I think there's an opportunity where we really want. So Soul Machines just raised a bunch of money out of strategic investor from Mercedes-Benz. So, which tells you something about the future of the auto industry. And I think that's one of the most successful capital raises, venture capital stories in the AI sector here. FaceMe, similar, have been doing, have raised a bunch of money, and Sequent is a mining and geology, civil engineering, 3D modelling. So they model geological formations, and they just raised over $100 million out of Series C investment out of Silicon Valley. So it can be done, so that's from the export point of view. In terms of actively bringing technologies in, you've got to remember we're a very small market here, and so it's, when a big international technology company is looking at where they're going to expand to next, they're going to go to Asia, they're going to go to Europe, they might come to me. So that's probably what that dynamic is. But yeah, no. So have you got anything in mind in particular? Or?
No, it was that last dynamic, right? That New Zealand's usually the last place in the OECD. Maybe once they finish with Australia, they'll often come over here. And is that any way of accelerating that? Just driving up,
It's a good question.
In general, and make that need for New Zealand businesses. They know what's already out there in the world.
We're a pretty open economy, and so there aren't particular barriers. I think it really is just we're small.
Yeah, it's just the attractiveness. How do you make it more attractive? That's my question. Thank you very much.
Shall I wrap up, Joe?
Yeah.
Because I think Anne needs to talk.
It's been really fantastic. So let's give Ben a hand. Thank you so much. Well done. Very, very interesting. Thank you. Right, so, please welcome Anne Wendt, who is a PhD student at AUT, to talk to us about the area that she has a lot of knowledge and experience in, which is spiking neural networks and basically biologically inspired AI. So, let's give her a round of applause now, even though she's
Sticking this together.
enough of my circus trick.
Ooh. Okay.
Yes, so it's just a very low tech lift required, right?
Can we go there?
With this thing?
Yeah, can we just move that slightly? Yeah, keep that. Yeah, good.
Can we come see it?
Yeah.
Maybe come right around. I can always move the camera.
Go on the other side.
How far can this go?
How about go on the other side?
Yeah, maybe go on the other side.
This way?
Just bring back that way.
So
I'll
you
tell
need to
you.
pull from that end.
Yeah. Go and keep stop. Yep, you're good there. Perfect.
That's all right? Yep.
Yes.
We can see the whole video, can see the whole slide? Yep.
Everybody can see everything.
Okay.
All right. Awesome. Thank you very much, Joe. Thanks, Lars, and welcome everybody from my side as well. So, as Joe mentioned, my name is Anne. I'm doing a PhD at AUT at the moment under supervision of Professor Nick Kasabov, who was actually speaking at this meetup in March, if I remember correctly. And I was already here, and at the end I gave a little introduction about my topic. And there were so many interesting questions from the audience that really, brought me forward in my PhD as well, that I thought, oh, I just come back and tell you a bit more about what I'm working on and use your combined brain cloud to, you know, give me some feedback on what I'm doing and how I should be doing it. So I'm very happy for you to ask questions in between, or to just say, oh, why are you doing this? Why don't you do it like that? And I'm very happy to take any feedback on board. I am now in the stage of my PhD where I do see the finish line, but I can still make changes and like try to optimize my work. So I'm very happy to take any feedback on board. So my topic is brain-inspired audiovisual information processing. So basically, I look at how the brain works, and I try to copy that into a computer. And I focus on two particular aspects, which are hearing and seeing, and how to combine that. And what you can see here is a three-dimensional neural network, and the blue area is round about where our auditory cortices are, and the orange area is round about where our visual cortex is. And I try to pick certain aspects of the biology and model them in this brain-like model. So my study has three topics: sound processing, vision processing, and audio-visual processing. So the first one is a sound processing system, and I thought I'd just give you a quick little overview of how our hearing works so that you better understand what I'm trying to do in my PhD. So sound comes into our ear, travels through the ear canal, travels through the little bones, and ends up in the cochlea. And the cochlea is a very, very cleverly built little organ, so to say. It's the spiral that is filled with a liquid, or actually, yeah, it's filled with liquid in different areas. And this sort of greenish color is the liquid, and obviously from the start of, or the entry of the cochlea to the apex, the sort of density of the liquid increases. And inside the cochlea runs a bone-like structure, which is called the basilar membrane, BM for short, which runs in the middle here, this blue line. And as you can see, it becomes slightly wider and it becomes brighter. And that is because at the beginning of the cochlea, the entrance, it's relatively stiff, and at the end, it's relatively floppy. So this creates very interesting physical properties in the cochlea, because our cochlea basically does a Fourier transformation of the sounds. When a sound comes in, and not talking pure tones because they're very rare in nature, sound comes in, the cochlea, because of its special physical properties, extracts the frequencies of this particular sound. Because what happens in the physics is that the sound wave, pink line, travels through the liquid, and the further it travels, the harder it gets. Because it's the same as if you were trying to shake, say, a cup of water and a bathtub full of water. If you move a large amount of liquid, it's hard. If you are very high frequency that wants to move very fast, moving the cup will be easier than moving the bathtub. So higher frequencies that move very fast and have very lots of fast vibration will not be able to travel as far through the cochlea as low frequencies. However, low frequencies, they can travel all the way, but they need to come back out. And because the basilar membrane is stiff at the beginning, it's quite difficult for lower frequencies to get through that. Just imagine hitting a wall and trying to hear that on the other side. versus, say, a floppy piece of paper. So because of that, every particular frequency travels to a particular point and crosses through the basilar membrane and goes back out again. And higher frequencies would cross here, and lower frequencies would go further into the cochlea and cross further down here and then go back all the way. And that tells your brain what your sound is composed of. Now, what?
I just had a light bulb moment.
Good to hear that.
High frequency is very short, low frequency is very long, hence why you feel it versus.
Yes, yes. And if you have a very, very low frequency, it doesn't actually cross the basilar membrane, it kind of just stays in the, but you still feel it somehow because it kind of jiggles all the way along. It's a quite intricate little mechanism. And now, imagine we're cutting through, say, right here, and turning that upside down, and then it looks like this. So this is the basilar membrane, and on the basilar membrane we have this thing which is called the organ of Corti. In the organ of Corti we have these hair cells, and when the sound comes in and jiggles the basilar membrane at a particular location, it jiggles these, the basilar membrane vibrates, the hair cells vibrate, they poke into this other membrane, and that creates an electric signal. And that goes into your brain. Does that make sense? So this is basically how you hear. And it then goes through your auditory pathway, it crosses over multiple times, and usually ends up crossed over in your auditory cortices, which are here in your temporal lobe, sort of round about above your ear. So this whole sort of encoding, transforming the sound into electrical signals is one thing that I've had a look at in my thesis. And I found a very good paper from 2014 where a team at the Technical University of Munich programmed a Python module called Cochlea, which compares different auditory models, because researchers have looked at it and they try to model aspects of the cochlea encoding, and this is really, the Python module is just an implementation of different cochlea models to compare them and how well they work. So what happens here, this first graphic, this is the sound wave. This particular one is from Vivaldi's Spring, from the Four Seasons. And these are the spike trains that this model creates. These are the higher frequencies and these are the lower frequencies. And as you can see, there's not really a lot of activity if there's not a lot of sound. But once the sound starts, the cochlea starts to put out spikes. And this is the time, right? So if I do this on a larger scale, I get this wonderful great big figure of dots. Now the problem with this is that this data is reasonably large, because we actually have 3,500 of these hair cells on our cochlea. So I essentially have 3,500 features of my data set, and however many time points I have in my sound. And I have to unpack that based on my sampling rate. So if I say have a normal CD, normal music has a sampling rate of 44 kilohertz. And if you have 2 seconds of music, you have 88,000 points. So this is long and large. And to stick this into a network to analyze, yeah, we do have some funding, but not that much. So I have to scale this down, and this is the second sort of thing that I'm actually currently working on to find the best way to scale this down, because It's some sort of compression, but I don't know. So if you, okay, I'm just zooming into this bit so you can have a look at what it actually looks like. So it creates these cool little, you can see there's like a bit of frequency coming through there, completely. So this is a zoom in of the figure I just showed you. And what I'm doing at the moment is that I just look at a little rectangle. I chop this up into lots of little rectangles, and I just say, okay, if there is a certain minimum amount of spikes in each of these rectangles, I will create a spike in my scaled down version of the data, and it sort of becomes smaller and smaller. And in the end, I have 28 features for my data with 360 time points instead of my previous 3,500 features with 45,000 time points what I had. So this is easier to be handled by the network. The only problem is that in biology, it actually scales up. But somehow I have to manage to put the technology and technology together. So if you have any bright ideas on how I could do this later, please let me know.
Ask a hearing aid.
I
So I've actually got new ones now, which I've tried.
Yeah.
And you go right inside the ear, and I must admit, the clarity is unbelievable, but they actually compress it, and they re-digitalize it.
Okay.
Just saying.
I will have a look at that. I have talked to the Auckland University audiology specialists on if this makes sense in their point of view, but I will ask them about hearing aids as
Because
well.
I have a standard hearing aid which hooks on the ear.
Yeah,
I haven't got it on tonight. I have my remote, but
yeah.
I haven't got it. But I experimented for about 6 months, but I was actually allergic to the product that they encapsulated in. So
Okay.
I could only have it on for 2 or 3 days, and but the
Yeah.
sound was incredible.
Okay.
And I was almost like had 20/20 sound. It's a wonderful way of recording it. But they actually sliced and diced it and compressed it. So I was explaining. So there's a possibility. Try it in hearing.
Yeah. Just that they might not necessarily publish their engineering, but
There's a lot of stuff on the web that's great.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Just ask a more basic question. So each of those dots, how did you pick up the cochlear output? You know, sort of all of this is based on, are these action potentials? You said they fire, right?
These are spikes.
What do you mean by spike exactly?
Well, it is a spike in the, like an action potential basically.
An action potential, right?
In my
How did you
spike
pick it up?
Was there a sensor in the brain? In
Was
the
it
ear?
on the cranial nerve? Was it outside EEG? Or how did you?
In this particular case, I use this Python module, sound in, spikes out. And this Python module models the cochlea in itself.
Oh, right, okay, so this is
Yeah.
a completely, okay, so got it, you've just
Yeah.
modeled, okay, cool.
Yeah, so this is
Right,
real sound,
all
but
right,
heard by the computer.
got it.
Yeah.
I didn't quite sure about this, but I know there is a model about sound encoding because there's some they call dot or specks is colorful to describe. I mean, it's color because if the dot, I mean here, if the dot is represent the frequency, and the color will represent the scale of the frequency.
Yes.
So some Python library can convert the sound into a very colorful chart of the right.
Okay. But if I have colors, then I have to deal with.
It's okay because
Okay.
it's just three-dimensional matrix or something.
Yes. Yes, I think what you mean is like a spectrogram or
Mhm.
like a cochleogram that would translate the frequencies into different colors and then using that. Yes. The only issue with that is that I want to feed this into a spiking neural network, and for that I kind of need zeros at once. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Because currently neural networks the many neural networks could do this 3D dimension, you know.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the kind of solution for this.
Yeah. Cool. That's where I actually originally came from in this kind of thought of how I would arrange this and plot this. That cocleograms and spectrograms already kind of look like this. So yes, I will look into that.
Just another thought.
That was sorry, a bad input.
Not sure if that will work here, but try PCA before to reduce the dimensionality.
PCA?
Like principal model.
Oh, PCA. Okay, yeah. No, I haven't. Not yet. Yes. The thing is, I also want to map this into the actual location. Yeah. So, but yeah.
Just using the model again, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, because there's an interesting other thing in our head, which is so-called tonotopic mapping. These higher frequency and lower frequency sounds, some get mixed up, but in general, they end up nicely arranged in your auditory cortex. So the blue colors are your higher frequencies and the red colors are your lower frequencies. And it's arranged in particular locations so that your higher frequencies are all in these two areas and your lower frequencies are all in this area. And this was a bit tricky to kind of visualize on 2G. So I asked Dr. Stefan Max from CoLab to help me visualize data that I got off a Dutch researcher. And you can see here the dark blue colors again are our higher frequencies. Yellow is sort of mid, around 1,000 hertz. And red frequencies, the lower frequencies down here. And it's got this really interesting layout that I thought might be good to preserve. There's not a lot of, biological research on does this make sense and why does it make sense. It somehow works. We don't really know why. But that's why I thought this aspect I would like to keep. So that if I have my spike trains coming from higher frequency neurons, I will put them into these blue areas and all the lower ones would go into the yellow and red ones. So, because we have to keep things simple, and these are, I think, about 27,000 points distributed over left and right, which would be way too much if I scaled this up. If I said I have 27,000 points in my auditory cortex, and the brain, which would go with that kind of size, would have to have around 1.5 million neurons. And I cannot really simulate a neural network with 1.5 million nodes. So we did a bit of a scale down. And now we have 20 on each side. But even with that, I'm actually testing different sizes to see if the size of the network will make a difference. But this is just a general layout of lower frequencies are the red ones here, and then blue ones are further to the end.
So you're saying you looked at biology,
Yes.
and you've used that to influence like the number of hops in the network apart that your different inputs are?
Yes, I'm still trying to find the best locations. At the moment, I have this. So as you could see in the previous one in the video, there were lots and lots and lots of yellow points because speech has a range of between 300 and 3,000 hertz. So that's where we have most of our processing. So there's not, this is a very linear mapping, which is why I'm adjusting this at the moment to follow this kind of S-shaped curve. and I will have more input into the speech range frequencies than I would have in the, say, 20 kilohertz. I mean, who can hear 20 kilohertz? So the top bit is anyways probably going to be chopped off, just because most people can't really hear it, and we don't have a lot of processing power in our brains to deal with that kind of frequency.
Well, what's the purpose of your endeavour? Like, what are you aiming towards? Because if people speak lots of yellow, but if you hear music, you might have across the board.
Yes.
If you have operatic, it might be highs and lows. So what's the objective to actually reason why you want to map a particular range? Is there a specific purpose at the moment?
I don't really just want to map the yellow range. I want to keep all the points
I agree.
in the thing, just that in my
It happens that way, yeah.
I will have less lower and less higher than I will have the ones in the middle.
Why?
Sorry?
Why?
Yeah,
that's me.
because the number of values, if you look at them in a histogram, they are just so much more.
No, sure, I get that. Just
Sorry.
getting
Why
that.
are you doing this?
Yeah.
Good question. I've been asking myself that. No, I want to see if it helps. This is a very exploratory, well, if somehow the results of my study when I run this with like speech data, say like spoken digits, and just see if I can get a reasonably good accuracy. So
The mapping, yes, you want to,
yeah.
it's a mapping process.
it is very exploratory. I'm really only seeing if it works.
I like the idea.
And if it doesn't work, then I'm still
Now I
on
know
my
where you're
feet.
going.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Just taking one step forward.
Yeah, kind of, because nobody has done this before, so I
Cool.
try it out. Yes?
I just had a bit of a technical question about what you've actually done here, because when the people, we had a guy, I don't remember his name, coming who explained spiking neural network, and they grew theirs with a genetic algorithm to get the right configuration. Have you just taken the model of the brain and then slimmed it down and put it basically as much as thinned it out, get as many neurons as you can handle, and then put that space in the right spaces and just use that?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. And the idea behind that is that because I have the locations in this three-dimensional network, I can then put it together with the visual information. And that's where it becomes interesting.
Feel free to swap out to the
No,
spine.
it just turns itself off after 20 minutes or so.
Oh, okay.
So another exploratory hypothesis that I have is, does it have any benefit to actually do it this way and to actually keep the locations and keep all these kind of aspects of the biology?
Oops.
Yeah. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't.
Because it means that what you're explaining to us, we've been given access, but maybe the person who just walked in has not got access, they can't hear a word you're saying. Is that where you're aiming? Because you're looking at the security factor of clamping down what you can or cannot hear or see. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's more
Did you
like
say security?
no, it's more like, can we do this, or does it work better or worse than other more mathematical approaches of doing this? Because there are lots of speech recognition algorithms and that kind of stuff, and this is really just another idea. Let's try it out, see what it does. I've run a few experiments on spoken digit recognition, and I got to the sort of 80% mark, and I thought, okay, this is a good start. So I'm just fine-tuning the model and just...
Yeah, the practical speech recognition issues right now, because most of the models, no matter what's the software you're using, but most of the model do not understand the generic English, generic accent, like say Chinese accent, Indian accent, or Kiwi accent, they're struggling. So I think this kind of mapping probably help to understand the accent, like say digit recognition. If you are telling 1 to 10 in UK accent, US accent, or the Indian accent, Chinese accent. The performance of the current speech recognition engine will varies a lot. I think this feature can, you can fit this feature into the model, into a new model which can easily classify that. That's what I'm thinking of.
Yes, I do hope it kind of smoothes it out a bit and kind of extracts the actual features of what is spoken. But I can't be sure yet.
Just going to the back of that question, have you got any data on the variance of the structure of, the audio cortex, the brain hairy bits?
Yes.
Across humans. Like, is there a structural difference between people in different countries where they speak in different ways? And that be a way, if this is effective, to quickly take technique and load up what it's going to technique and what it's going to measure? Is there variance like that? You know?
Not on the level of the cochlea. The next level up in the auditory pathway, there are definitely neurons that respond to certain sounds. So there was a very interesting study that I found where they tested babies that were 5 months and I think 11 months old. And the 5 or 6 month old baby could still hear the difference between da and ga, which is the sort of backwards D. 11-month-old babies could not anymore, unless they had been brought up speaking like Hindi or some language that makes use of these sounds. So when we are born, we have this very generic kind of arrangement of neurons and in the cochlea, hair cells and that kind of stuff. But our brain very quickly realizes which ones they need and which ones they don't need, and then they get repurposed for other things. So there are certainly differences between people of different cultures, hearing different sounds. I cannot hear the different tones in Mandarin. I cannot. I know they're there, and I try very hard to pronounce them, but I cannot hear them because at some stage, when I was maybe 7, 8 months old, my brain decided, oh, we don't need this. Let's use it for something else. So it is known, but it is not exactly known how it actually works. How it actually works, and how the plasticity of the auditory cortex works as well, and the auditory pathway.
Excuse me, and just so you know, we've got probably about 20 minutes before we need to wrap up.
Yes.
So if there's a certain point you want to get to on your slides, feel free to just tell us to be quiet for a while. That's fine. And just maybe just to guide which questions you bring forwards as well for this. We've got 2 other meetups we've had recently on the details of this spiking neural network style of model. And those both had very active Q&A sessions that we've got recorded. So maybe might want to focus on this specific application of those models.
I'm not actually going to go into any details of spiking neurons for exactly that reason. It's just sort of the basis for my model, and I just hook on to that. But are there any more questions about the auditory? I'm quite happy to talk about the auditory because that's actually what I'm working on at this moment. So, sure.
I just wanted to...
He had a question first.
I just want to add something because you mentioned Mandarin language. So every material in the universe has its own resonance frequency as a characteristic.
Yes.
So if a sound obtains the resonance frequency of the brains, of the ear cells, the receptor cells, the electric signal will be generated and it goes to the brain through the nerves.
Yes.
The neurons. Okay? So I'll give you an example. So this window has its own resonance frequency as a character.
Yes.
There are lots of sounds here, but they cannot vibrate the window. The window. But if the truck comes, the sound of the truck obtains and includes the resonance frequency of the window.
Yes.
That's why the window starts vibrating.
Yes.
That's the way the brain perceives, and the perception happens.
Yes.
So there are lots of frequencies, but we cannot hear that.
Yeah.
That's why they cannot obtain or actually the resonance frequency of the receptors of the ear, but there are
Yes.
around us.
Yes.
So whatever you say is about what we can hear, like we can easily hear, but there are lots of other things that brain has answer to, and that's subconsciously. So they can also get answer from the brain.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
There is actually an interesting phenomenon regarding to the masking of sound, right? So if I just go back to this one, if you have a low frequency sound and it goes all the way, it will vibrate these first bits a little bit because, I mean, the liquid in the cochlea is still moving, which means that you can use a low frequency sound to not be able to hear a high frequency sound, which I also find quite interesting, but that would be too much to model in one PhD. So yeah, but it is the loudness also plays a role. If you have a very loud sound, it will not just vibrate like right here; it will vibrate in the area, which will also tell your brain some more information about how loud the sound is, what frequency it has, and that kind of stuff. So yeah, good point you made. Yes. The problem with the auditory processing system is that it's not as well understood as the visual system, just because it's so much smaller, and because, yeah, the visual system just seems to be more interesting to scientists, I don't know. So there are a few things that I wanted to model and couldn't find out because they hadn't been found yet. Yes. Oh.
Perhaps you may find.
Probably not, because I'm not a neuroscientist. I am interested in biology, which is why I'm doing this, but I have no biochemistry background or anything like that. So yeah, I have to rely on other people to find out. Shall we move on? So as I said, I have three parts to my model: auditory, visual, and combined. And the second part would be the visual system. And you all know this is the eye, and on the eye we have these rods and cones, and rods enable you to do...
No, I didn't know.
Oh, okay. Rods enable you to see light or not light, and cones enable you to see different colors of light. And this is all chemistry. So you can see this rod has these discs in there, and if there's a light photon coming in, or multiple, they trigger a chemical reaction in the top disc, and that creates an electrical spike in this particular rod. And actually one photon is enough to trigger a rod. And then if you have enough rods spiking at the same time, or sending signals, they converge at a ratio of about 100 into 1, then you will actually be able to see something at this particular point. The codes, we have 3 types of codes. Some other animal species have more, but humans have 3 types of codes. Dogs don't. That's why they can't really see red and green. And they react with a particular wavelength of the light, and that triggers a chemical reaction, and then they spike as well and send a signal into the retina node. So light comes in, and all this green stuff is full of rods and cones. And you will generally find more rods towards the periphery, so that is the outside, and lots of cones in this area here, which is the most sensitive one, called the fovea, which is this little dip here, which is specifically there so that more light can get through to the lower layers and more detail can be seen. I mean, you all know that the point where you're looking at has the biggest focus, and you can sort of see what's going on, but your brain just remembered which colors were there and fills them back in, but you can't actually see the colors. So if Joe would change the color of his shirt at the moment, my brain would just not notice. So this is what happens in the eye. And in my research, I look at video data for a very simple reason. Your eye is never static. It keeps moving around in little things called saccades, because these cells, these rods and cones, photoreceptor cells, they only detect changes in light. So if you keep it static, there's no change and they won't trigger. So that's why I look at video images, at video data and not at images. Lots of machine learning algorithms look at images, but I specifically do not. One interesting mechanism in the eye is edge detection, which is a big focus of all the convolutional neural networks, right? They like see, oh, there's this particular pattern keeps happening, so this is then convoluted down to a particular feature, and this is an edge. Your eye does something similar, actually. So if you have, these are your photoreceptors, in this case, they are just rods. And these blue ones are respond to the, actually there are different types. So let's just say these blue ones respond to the absence of light. If there's no light, they spike. And these purple ones, they spike, or they send a signal if there is light. And they can talk to each other through these horizontal cells and inhibit each other and excite each other. And sometimes their roles are swapped. So we have these groups of rods all across our retina that have this particular arrangement. So if the light stream comes through, there are wonderful animations of this on YouTube, it's fabulous. If the light stream comes through and see the bit on this side is dark and here's the light coming through, these ones will fire and inhibit the other ones and excite these ones. And if the light is exactly in the same way as this arrangement would expect it, so that the center would be off and the surround would be on, then that's when it fires. It's very excited, it fires more. It likes that very much. If only parts of it match, it doesn't fire quite as much. So they talk to each other, and by that they say, okay, we have a line of like an edge going through like this, and then the next group will say, oh, but we have an edge not going through, so obviously this is part of something else. Not really sure if I'm explaining this very well, but this is essentially doing convolution.
If there was a different line passing through, as you just said, that might be, in retrospect, how we perceive it as 30 metres away versus 3 metres away. Would that help? Because doesn't the focus also depend on the retina as to how far away it is compared to the strength of light?
Yeah, how you kind of use your eye to kind of focus on different areas. Yeah, so I haven't actually looked into 3D vision yet. I'm really just looking at flat videos. That is, however, my next, after I finish the audio thing. That's where I want to go. Yeah, so this is in principle how it works. And the data that we have used in preliminary experiments are written digits. But because I said well, static images won't work, we just wiggle them on the screen. So they're not static anymore. And these are the neurons, which I will explain very shortly what the neurons mean, but this is over time, and you can see that they spike in different patterns depending on where they see this change of the edge of the number 9. And for this written digit recognition, wiggling written digit recognition, we actually got 91% accuracy, which we were very happy about. So once the eye creates all these signals from the image it sees, and these are quite a lot of signals because you have millions of photoreceptor cells on your retina. They go through your brain, they cross over as well, but only halfway, so that everything that is on the right side of your visual field ends up in the left side of your visual cortex. Everything that's on the left side of your visual field ends up the right side of your visual cortex at the back of the brain.
Is that per eye, or is each eye split in half?
Each eye is split in half, so yeah, which is weird but interesting.
Weird to me. Awesome.
So of course we are trying to model this as well, and I'm saying we because I had a brilliant, actually he was a bachelor student, helping me out with this project. So the other thing that I mentioned was this little dip, right, where you can see the best, where you have the sharp focus. That actually takes up half of your visual cortex in terms of processing power. So these little things in the middle end up in larger areas of your visual cortex. And the periphery is kind of scaled down. So here we have this sort of, this effect that blows up the center, which is your point of focus and the important bit at the moment, and the surrounding area, which is not so important, just gets scaled down and compressed, and then well, processed as well, but with less processing power. So the way we set this up, and I'll probably show this slide first. The way we set this up, if this is our visual field, and these red dots are in the center, you can see we have lots of red dots, and then the greens end up there, and the yellows end up there. It doesn't just flip the image like this, it also flips it upside down. So that's why this is sort of flipped backwards and forwards. And this is how we map it into this three-dimensional network, and we're looking at it from the back at the moment. And the way we approached this was that we have our, if this is a 128 by 128 video frame, we look at the 8 central pixels, and then we look at receptive fields of different sizes, 4x4, 8x8, 60 by 16, and 32 by 32. And this works out quite nicely mathematically. This bachelor student was doing a degree in mathematics, so that's why it works out so nicely. And these overlap. So, because that's also what really happens in your eyes, that the central area, because it's so important, is part of all these little squares here and ends up in there. And of course the center part, the red bit, is flipped as well. And the center part takes up the sort of bottom bit of the visual cortex. So that was that project. Anything that I can explain into more detail, or
combining the two?
Yes, that's the next step. Anybody have any questions about the
So, for
visual
example,
itself?
if we hear a sound,
Yes.
we focus on it, and it becomes memory, I guess, or
Yeah.
something within that we recognise into our database.
Yeah.
And so when we've heard it 10 times, we go, oh, that's a drum 100 metres away or whatever.
Yeah.
But when we hear a bike go across us, it's a different sound, obviously, and a different look. So that creates another memory. So I guess coming back to the neuron factor, though, there's a slicing and dicing, I guess, can be quite tricky.
Yes, that's what I found as well. And the thing is, your sort of emotional state influences how you perceive things. And say, if you watched a horror movie and suddenly you hear something creaking, you're like, ah! So it all interacts with each other, and this is such a complex, I mean, your brain is such a complex organ. It's been studied for so long, and still we don't really know what's going on, unfortunately. But I'm sure we'll get there eventually. So the audiovisual system makes use of the information that we have. And this has been studied in monkeys mainly. This is a monkey brain. There are two distinct pathways in brains. One that deals with the location of objects in relation to your own location, and one that deals with the identification of the object, which goes down into the temporal lobe, whereas the where pathway goes up into the parietal lobe. And this is quite interesting because you get from both the auditory cortex and the visual cortex, there are specialized areas that extract this kind of information. What do I see and hear, and where is it? And these specialized cells that send it, the specialized neurons send it through specialized pathways into these areas to process, and then it all ends up in our frontal cortex that sticks it all together and says, yep, that was a car, yep, that was a horse. And this is what I hope I can stick into my network. However, we're not quite there yet. At the moment, I just have these pretty pictures of what it's going to look like. And I originally, 3.5 years ago, was planning to do a study on how we process language. And I figured out, oh, this is not really very well understood and explored anyways. So let's start with the basics and start with audiovisual perception. But I've never really let go of the idea of language. And my final case study that I'm hopefully going to finish early next year is that I want to see if I can combine the signs of New Zealand Sign Language with spoken words. And there's a very good database being put out by Google of lots of people saying 33 words, which I found in the New Zealand Sign Language Dictionary as little videos of the corresponding signs. So my original idea will hopefully be realized after 4 years of study. And then I can see if I can somehow create these connections between the spoken word and the sound and the sign, and the movement of the sign, and see if I can teach my network to recognize the one and output the other, sort of like a translation system, maybe. And that would be my eventual goal. Yeah. Thank you.
You'd make more money if you invented something that could do lip reading.
There are lip reading thingies, lip reading algorithms, and they are actually better than humans nowadays. I just read something a few weeks ago. Yeah, that's true.
Should make AUT more money.
Yeah, and then, I'm doing a PhD, I'm not doing it to earn money, right?
Yeah, like ask Peter Jackson with his last movie efforts bringing the old war movies to life. Use lip reading service and AI to actually understand what people were saying in the old black and white
No,
movies.
he actually does that. We've got lip readers to translate.
That's what I'm saying.
Good. Anyone else down the back who's been missing out on Q&A? We've got through a lot of questions during the talk, I think. You've been
Yes.
very gracious listeners to
You're welcome.
Shall we, yeah.
Okay.
And also helps organize organised this meetup. So yeah, we're very grateful for everything she does for us.
Good.